Hey guys, Harley Adam here. As I had mentioned to Hard Knocks Forge a while ago, and as I had said in one of my previous videos, I'm going to start making a series of videos based on homebrewing. This first video is just going to be the absolute basics, the basics of what you're going to need to get into brewing, and it's really simple and fairly inexpensive, to be honest. What you're going to want to, what most guys start with, and what you're probably going to want to start with, is a 1-gallon starter kit. They are available just about anywhere. They're going to have them at your local homebrew shop. Most towns will have a local homebrew shop, or you can get them online at a whole bunch of different sites like the Homebrew Barn, Northern Brewer, More Beer, and more other sites than I could possibly mention here. So, go ahead and shop around. What you're going to find is most starter kits are going to be 1 gallon in size. They are going to be about $50. They're fairly inexpensive, and they're going to come with everything that you need to brew beer, except for a brew kettle and clean sanitized bottles. That's all you're going to need to supply. So the first thing that you're going to notice when you open up your kit, you're going to see typically one of these, a 1-gallon glass jug, glass fermenter jug. They call it a carboy. These are very, very handy. I've upgraded this one with something called a thermometer. You can see here that it's got gradated temperatures, and you can also see that it says lager and ale, and those are the two different styles of beer. You'll find that most lagers are fermented at colder temperatures, which means that they're typically made during the colder months of the year, although if you're like me and you have advanced equipment, you can make them any time of year. And ales are fermented there. It's a top fermenting yeast, and it ferments at a warmer temperature than lager does. So those are pretty good to make during the late spring to early fall months, because it's very easy to ferment them in your house without having to use any kind of temperature control equipment. Eventually you're going to want to get temperature control equipment because it will allow you to have better control over your beers. So again, fermenter is first, the carboy, or you can also ferment with a bucket. This is a food grade fermenting bucket. It's got a stopper here for your airlocks. It is gradated here, 1/2 gallon, 1 gallon, 1.5 gallon. 1.5 is about as much as you want to put into this thing, even for a mildly fermenting beer, because it's just going to blow the top off of this thing. Again, I upgraded this one with a thermometer. I like these thermometers. They allow me to really keep tabs on the temperature of what I'm fermenting. I just mentioned an airlock. There are going to be two types of airlocks that you're going to use. An airlock, all an airlock does, well, the purpose of an airlock is to allow CO2 from the fermenting yeast to escape, which will keep from pressurizing your container and blowing the top off and ruining your batch of beer. And they also prevent oxygen from getting in, or air, outside air. And oxygen getting into your beer will oxidize the beer, which means that it will not last as long. Your beer will turn very quickly. And it also prevents additional microbes from getting in. So bacteria, viruses, what have you. Stuff will get in there and it will create all kinds of off flavors, and it will destroy a batch of beer very, very quickly. Again, there are two styles of airlocks. This one is the very simple double bubble airlock is what I call it. It's got a cap here on the top. And you put water into this chamber here, and it will have a fill line where you don't want to fill it anywhere beyond that. And as the yeast ferment the sugars inside of the wort, which is unfermented beer, they're going to CO2 is a byproduct of that, and the CO2 will come up here, and it will create pressure. It will push the fluid up. It'll push the water up. You want to use either some sanitized water, or you can use alcohol like vodka, as long as it's sanitary. So it will create pressure. It will push the fluid up, and then the bubble, once it gets past this little bottom hoop here, the bubble will suddenly float up to the top, and the water or fluid will drop back down, and it will prevent any bacteria or anything from getting back inside. Essentially, all it is just a one-way valve. Again, this is the double bubble style, and then there's also the 3-part style. The 3-part style has your main body, which is marked with a fill line, which I think you can kind of see right there, and it even says fill. So you put your sanitized liquid in there. There is a little floater, and as the CO2 comes up through the center tube here, it will round the corner and go down in between the floater and the tube, and it will create pressure because it will push up on this. This will float up, and when it gets high enough, the bubbles will escape these little slots, and then that will in turn float up through the body, and it will go out through the cap right here, which has, as you can see, a bunch of little holes in it, and it will escape out the top. I prefer this style because they are easier to clean, and you'll understand what I'm talking about in a moment, which is when you're fermenting these beers, sometimes you'll get a slightly more aggressive fermentation, and it will create more of what's called a krausen, which is the foam cap that sits on the top of your wort as the yeast is fermenting all of the sugars and turning it to alcohol and CO2. And that will come up through your airlock. It'll come up into here and it will clog these things. And then they won't allow the CO2 to escape, which will build up pressure in your fermenter. It'll blow the seal and you'll have stuff go everywhere. It'll be a mess and it will ruin an entire batch of beer. Very, very bad day. So if you get an aggressive fermenter, what you do then is you take one of these. It's just a simple rubber tubing, vinyl tubing, or nylon, and you can press that down into the rubber stopper, and then you put the other end of this into a bucket or a bottle, preferably at least a gallon of sanitary fluid, and then that essentially just creates a giant airlock, a giant one-way valve. And your large container will gather all of the stuff that's floating out through the tube so that it will be much less likely to clog. You can also get these in much larger sizes, which is again why I said I prefer this style of cap, because it's got this little tower down here on the stopper, and you can put a huge blow-off tube on this and it's much less likely to clog. Actually, I hadn't mentioned this, but there are two different styles of stoppers. You've got just a regular rubber stopper with just a hole through it, and then this style is the one that I prefer, which is a multi-purpose stopper. It'll fit a larger variety of bottlenecks. And it has a little tower there that you can push a blow-off tube, a big blow-off tube over the top of. And again, much less likely to clog. You can actually even see the difference in size between the two holes there. This one is definitely bigger. I much prefer these. They're great. So, another thing that's going to come in your kit, actually I'm not sure if it comes in most kits, but you're probably going to want to get one, which is an Autosiphon. This is an Autosiphon. This one obviously is cracked, so it's pretty much useless, but I'm using it just for demonstration purposes. This is used to transfer fluid from one container to another. You can use it at the end of your boil, although you probably don't want to do that because it will cause this thing to crack like crazy, because this is just Lexan, so it tends to, like, when it gets hot, it tends to crack very easily. It's a great material otherwise, but if you leave it out in the sun, or if you put it into hot fermented, hot fluid like boiled wort, it's going to crack and then it's going to be useless. This one got left out in the sun, unfortunately. Like I said, I'm using it for demonstration purposes. So it's got a cap on the end here. When you put it down into the fluid, this cap will prevent it from sucking up all of the sediment that's at the bottom. That just pops right off, and this is the intake for your fluid. So what happens is there's a rubber piston inside here on top of this plastic tube, which creates a seal on the inside of this. So when you draw this up, it draws fluid in through the bottom here up into this chamber. And then that's a one-way valve right here at the bottom. And then when you press this down, it creates pressure. The fluid comes up through this tube and then out into your transfer hose. And you put the container that you're transferring the fluid into at a lower level than the one that you're transferring fluid from, and gravity does all the work. It's like magic. That's why they call it an Autosiphon, because it's automatic. Great little item. Another purpose for the Autosiphon when you're done, or you can use just a bottling bucket, but I usually use the Autosiphon, is for bottling. This is a bottling wand. This is another great little item. There are two different kinds of these. They just have two different types of valves here in the bottom. The cheaper style is held in there by gravity. I'm not so much a fan of this. This one is spring-loaded, so it's a much more positively locking system. So it's just got a simple plastic tube on the end of that. This little cap goes around the end of the tube and it creates a seal. And then inside there, you have a spring, and you have this little tapered rubber stopper. You can see it's got a taper. So when that's in place and you've got the spring in there, When there's no pressure on the end of this, that little stopper is all the way down and it creates a seal around the inside, so no fluid will flow through. When you're bottling, I'll use this as an example. You probably don't want to bottle beer in a 1 gallon jug because you'll never be able to drink enough of it. It's a waste. So when this goes down in here into the bottom, you can kind of see that's standing up. When you put pressure on it, it presses down, it opens up the valve, and the fluid flows. And then when you release it, when you lift up, it automatically seals at the bottom, fluid flow stops, and you can pull it out of your bottle. The nice thing about that is when you're bottling, this is very specifically designed so that when you pull this up out of your bottle of now beer that you're going to bottle, that you're going to cap, it will create just the right amount of headspace at the top so that the priming sugar that you put in your now beer to carbonate it will have enough room to reanimate the yeast and create enough CO2 to carbonate the beer inside the bottle. Great process. I have stopped bottling at this point. I just keg all of my beers, but a lot of guys do still bottle, and bottling is still a very viable way. In particular, the only way to actually send somebody beer is to bottle. But bottling is kind of a pain. It takes a lot more work. But again, it's part of the process. Another couple of things that are going to come in your starter kit. You're going to get a small amount of sanitizer. Sanitizer is just essentially created, it's essentially included just to kill any bacteria that are going to be on any surfaces that are going to touch the beer once it's done with the boiling process. Very, very important. You want to keep any microbes away from your beer. And then you're also going to get some priming sugar, and you're going to get some cleaner. And the cleaner you want to use before the sanitizer. The cleaner will clean everything out and get rid of all of the bacteria. The sanitizer will prevent it from coming back. Bob's your uncle. So, as I said, one of the things that is not going to come with your kit is a kettle, a brew kettle. Most kits will tell you you can start with something as small as a 2-gallon brew kettle. I prefer to start with a slightly larger size just because you can prevent something that's called a boilover, which if you experience that, you'll know what I'm talking about. Boilovers are a pain to clean because wort that has barley sugars in it is very, very sticky, and it is incredibly difficult to clean off of any surfaces, aka your stove. So what I did was I bought a very inexpensive 5-gallon stainless steel kettle. Just got a simple flat top, stainless steel. This cost me like $11 at a discount store. And then again, another thing that you're going to need is some sanitized bottles, and that is just a bottle at the end of it. Your kit will come with bottle caps. I've got several different styles. I like these American flag caps because America. And then it will also come with a bottle capper. Now this is a very, very simple device, but it's very handy. As you can see, it's got a spring inside there, and there is a tapered bell, and then these little metal clips essentially grab onto the bottleneck, and this little thing in the center is a magnet. So that will hold on to the bottle cap. You put the bottle down on the table, put this on the top, and you press this down, and as you press these arms down farther and farther, the pressure it creates on the top will press this bottle cap with the spring, because this thing is spring loaded. It will press this bottle cap down inside that tapered bell, and it will squeeze these flanged edges, and it will create a seal on the bottle cap. So then you have a bottle of beer. Great little item. There are a couple of different styles of bottle cappers. This is just the cheapest one. There's also one that's like on a stand and it's got a big press arm. That's when you're starting to get into more advanced stuff. I will get into that in one of the later videos. And the last thing that you're going to get inside your kit is an ingredient pack. This was a slightly larger one. I've graduated to 5-gallon batches. I don't really need to make a whole lot more than 5-gallon. Some guys can make huge batches of beer. I don't see any need because there's just me consuming it. And I can't drink as much as I used to. So a 5-gallon batch for me is just fine. And this particular kit is a very light IPA. It's a single hop IPA. It comes with specialty grains. These specialty grains are, as I may have mentioned, the extract that you're going to get is very simple in nature. you don't really have a whole lot of variety with it. They have trouble making it. It's almost impossible to make, you know, a whole bunch of different varieties of flavor of malt extract, just because of the nature of the thing. So when you want to add some specific flavors or characters of another type of malt, you get what's called specialty malts. And they put your specialty malts in the bag. It's all ground up. There are several different types of grains in here. And then you get a muslin bag. You put the grain inside the muslin bag, and as you first heat up the water to make your beer, you steep this in it just like tea. It's very, very simple. This one also comes with a 1 gallon bag of dried Pilsner malt, Pilsen Light, and this one also has 6 pounds of liquid Pilsen style malt. That's a syrup. And then the last thing that it will come with is, you know, obviously it's going to come with a yeast. There are specific yeast types that you use for specific types of beer. And then this one comes with one style of hop. Again, this is a single hop IPA, and it comes with all Chinook. And there are 3 ounces of Chinook, which for 5 gallons of beer is a pretty decent amount of hops. So again, those are just all the things that are going to come in your 1 gallon kit. The 1 gallon kits, as I said, they are going to contain everything that you really need, everything that you need to make beer except for your bottles and your brew kettle. Once you get those 2 items, you're off to the races. And again, like I said, most of those beginner kits only cost about $50. So to get into the experimentation of it, to try out the hobby, is very inexpensive. And I also still use my 1 gallon fermenters. What I'll use those for is like experimentation. If I'm trying, say if I'm trying one style of beer and I want to try several different types of yeast to see what those different types of yeast will do to the flavor, I will use several different 1 gallon fermenters. I have a bunch of them. I have probably a couple dozen. Actually, no, probably about a dozen. But I'll use those and just use a different type of yeast in each one of them, and then that will allow me to do experimentation with that. That can be a lot of fun, because you can find a style that really appeals to you, and you can make it in a bigger batch. But anyway, that's going to be pretty much all for this video. If you guys have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments below. I'd appreciate it if you guys would keep the comments PG rated, because, you know, I just don't really need that kind of drama on my channel. But I know most of you guys are not like that, so I definitely appreciate it. I appreciate all my subscribers. Thank you guys very much for coming by and watching. Thank you to all of the guys who have been supporting us lately. I know we have run into some challenges with the new YouTube partner program parameters. Thank you guys for helping everybody out. In particular, thank you to guys like MD Lee and Hard Knocks Forge and Eddie 802 at 802 Diesel Crew. Thank you guys for creating a groundswell of support for smaller channels, trying to get them the help that they need. I appreciate you guys. Again, like I said, I appreciate all my subscribers. Please keep it dirty side down. Have a productive day, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.